Hey everyone, today I'm doing a wrap-up of Give Yourself Goosebumps books 7 through 9. So the first one, number 7, is Under the Magician's Spell. And this book really surprised me. So in this book, you, your friend, and your little sister are going to a shopping mall, and you go to this magic shop, and your friend gets these handcuffs stuck on, these like magic handcuffs stuck on his wrist, and he can't get them off. And the first like turning point, like decision you make in the story, which depending on which choice you make, will split you off into one of the two story arcs. One of the story arcs is you go back home and you get these magical handcuffs off, and then you discover that I think your little sister steals this magic book of spells from the magic shop. And you discover inside that whoever steals this book has like 24 hours to return it, I believe. And if it's not returned within that time frame, then the sorcerer who owns the magic book will make the thief of the book disappear forever. And you discover that your sister is slowly like vanishing, like her hands turn invisible and whatnot. So you have to hurry up and return this book. But before you are able to, a bunch of bullies from school steal the book. And then the rest of the story arc is spent trying to get the book back from them, essentially. And there's a lot of different crazy stuff that happens in this story arc, and I really enjoyed it. It was really entertaining, and the magical aspect is played out very well, in my opinion. There's definitely like some fantasy elements to this one. It's not all grounded or anything like that. You're not just trying to steal back this book. Like, you can actually use spells and stuff when you do find it, and there's different things that happen in regards to that. And I thought it was very entertaining. I like that story arc. And then the other story arc is you use one of the spells in the book to get the handcuffs off of your friend. And what happens then is you fall down like a trap door or something in the magic shop, I believe. And you end up in like this big auditorium, like theater place where this magic show is taking place. And the magician or sorcerer or whatever he's called in this book, he basically is like the antagonist of this story, the villain. And he reveals to you this collection he has of human heads. Yes, he has a collection of human heads that are like in jars and stuff. And if you don't give him back his book of magic spells, he's basically going to cut off your heads and add it to his collection. So it's kind of dark and messed up. I was really surprised by that. I'm like, wow, it's a little dark, but okay, I'm down. I'm interested. And you decide to hide the book, and instead of giving it back to him, you're trying to figure out a way to like escape this magic show. And there's a lot of different crazy stuff that happens. You're kind of forced to like participate in this magic show. One of the options is, do you want to be part of the trick where you're sawed in half, or do you want to be part of the trick where you're in a box and like swords are placed into it? And there's all sorts of different crazy decisions you can make. And I really enjoyed this story arc as well. I thought they were both really fun. This book really surprised me, honestly. This one I didn't really remember much, and I thought it was really good. I don't think I have any major complaints with this book, to be honest. I just didn't quite love it. I think there was about one good ending for each of the story arcs, which again is sort of typical of these books, or like average, I guess. But I really enjoyed most of the endings in this book. A lot of the bad endings were quite humorous, which is always a delight. And a lot of the choices were actually really interesting. And like some of them you actually have to put a little bit of thought into. And yeah, this was just a really fun book. I don't have anything bad to say about it. I just didn't quite love it. I think I give this one like a 3.5, rounded up to 4 stars. So yeah, Under the Magician's Spell, number 7. This was a good one. I liked it. And number 8, we have Curse of the Creeping Coffin. And this one I did remember still fairly well going into it. This was one I read a lot as a kid. And I have to say, this is probably one of the best ones in the series. Now, in this book, you're going to visit your grandma, and you discover that her house is haunted, and there's a cemetery in her like backyard, and the tombstones are like moving, and they're basically like forming a message. The first letters of the last names on each of the tombstones like spell out a message, and they keep like shifting and moving and whatnot. And this is one of the story arcs, I should say. And basically you have to like figure out what they're saying, and then you also have to figure out how to stop them and how to like get rid of the ghosts in the house. And this story arc is incredible. I'm just going to be upfront. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. This story arc is one of the first story arcs in the probably the first one in the Give Yourself Goosebumps series to utilize this sort of like challenge aspect in these books. And this is something that would come along and be more common in the later books in the series. But early on, I think this is the first book to utilize this sort of like more game aspect or like element to the story, where a lot of the choices are sort of dependent on how much you're paying attention to the story. There's some little details in the story that you have to pay attention to that could affect your choices later on. And it's very like objective based. Like you want to figure out how to get rid of these ghosts, and then there's this ghost known as the MPG, which is the most powerful ghost, and you have to try to figure out how to defeat him and stop this haunting and get rid of these ghosts, basically, because they're going to kill you and your grandmother if you don't. And this one isn't like particularly dark and not quite as creative as like Under the Magician's Spell was. It's more of a basic like haunting ghost type story. But just the functions of this book and how the story like ties into the different decisions and choices you have to make, I think was just a really, really cool, very well done, very well executed. And yeah, this was just a really good one, honestly. The other story arc is you decide to, one of the choices early on in the story you make is you can decide to run away and go back home. And if you do that, one of the ghosts from your grandmother's house follows you home, and then he's haunting you, and you have to try to figure out how to get rid of him or whatever. That story arc is not as good. That one is a little bit more just kind of boring, and there's really not a lot going on there. Thankfully, the story arc where you're at your grandmother's house and trying to get rid of these ghosts and whatnot takes up the majority of this book, and it is just so good. Such a fun time. And it's a little bit challenging too. And again, it's not like a super elaborate like puzzle or anything, but it does require you to put a little bit more thought into the choices you're trying to make. Everything's not just completely random like it is in some of the GYG books. There's a clear objective that you're trying to achieve, and the story is like kind of woven very neatly into this sort of like mystery you're trying to solve, I guess. So yeah, I give this one a very solid 4 stars, maybe even like a 4.5, honestly. The only thing that brings it down, like I said, is the other story arc where you go home and then trying to get rid of the ghost that's haunting you. That one was just okay. But yeah, Curse of the Creeping Coffin is a great one. And I love the cover art on this one too. This one has an excellent cover. So that's number 8. And then number 9, we have The Knight in Screaming Armor. This one also has a really good cover. I think this is one of the coolest covers in the GYG series. Unfortunately, though, I think the cover might be the best part of this book. So, in The Knight in Screaming Armor, your cousins come to visit you, and they're from New England, and they bring with them a bunch of relics from the museum, I think. I believe their dad is like the owner of this museum, and they're moving the relics to the United States, and they come to visit you, and they bring with them like this old suit of armor that's supposedly haunted. And basically, this one is very heavily fantasy based. You basically travel to this fantasy world of like medieval times, and from there just a bunch of crazy random stuff happens. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this one. This one, unlike Curse of the Creeping Coffin, does not really have as clear of an objective. It kind of does. There's sort of this evil knight as depicted in on the cover, I guess, and you're trying to like defeat him sort of. But there's really not as much of a cohesive story here as there was in the previous book. It's just a lot of random scenes, one after another. There's mud monsters in this book. There's like these giant like crows or ravens. There's like these, there's one sequence where you're in an attic and there's like these mannequins and talking mannequin heads or something. I don't even remember. This book is just kind of wild and all over the place. And it sounds like it might be fun, but it was just a little bit too unhinged for my tastes. And I think one of the biggest things that I did not like about this book is the choices in it. A lot of the choices in here, and some of the other GYG books are guilty of doing this, but this one is the worst so far. A lot of the choices in here are completely dependent upon chance, or like, I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of the choices is, like, if you're reading this book on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, go down this path, turn to that page. If you're reading this book on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, go down that path and turn down that page. Or there's some options where it will ask you, like, you'll be in a precarious situation, life-threatening or whatever, and it'll just say at the bottom of the page, do you make it out of the situation? If so, turn to page so-and-so. Or if you think you're about to die, turn to page so-and-so. It's like, what? It's like, what kind of decision is that to make? Like, obviously, you're going to choose the one where you survive. There's a lot of just really kind of dumb choices in here. Like, there's not much thought required to put into them, and it just really takes the fun out of it. And it just feels like this one was more lazily written than a lot of the previous GYG books in the series, and it really detracted from my enjoyment of it. And there were some entertaining sequences in this book. I'm not saying it was all bad. It is definitely a very corny, like, fun adventure kind of book. There is some fun to be had here, but for the most part, it was just a little bit too unhinged for me and not cohesive enough, and a lot of the choices were just not good. So I give this book probably a 2 out of 5 stars. Probably one of my least favorite GYG books so far, but it does have an amazing cover. So yeah. So these are the 3 Give Yourself Goosebumps books I've read recently. Let me know what you guys think of these ones if you've read them. And that's all I have for today. So thanks for watching, guys. Peace.